This is Frank Islam, Chairman and CEO of FY Investment Group and your host of Washington Current Review, where we interview leading voices from business and politics that impact you, the viewer. Today, our guest is Deep Sran. Nice to meet you, and thank you for coming to our show.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and what do you want to do, and why do you want to do?
I grew up in the area.
Okay.
I was born in Maryland. I'm a former corporate lawyer, but I realized education is the way to change the world. So I decided to work in building a better K-12 education program. Thought I'd work in public school or charter school, but ended up founding an independent school in Ashburn. Then I realized our reach was not great enough. So we started with a friend of mine, an educational technology company.
Okay.
And so I realized I've been working outside of government for a long time to build a better world. And I realized at this moment we have to reset in some ways the direction of the country. My experience as the child of immigrants was a land of opportunity and inclusion. And I want the same thing for my kids. So I decided to work in politics for everybody else's kids and members of this community. I mean, we all are better together.
So you would like to run for the seat that's held by Barbara Comstock,
right,
which is in Northern Virginia.
Right.
And what qualifies you to run for a Congress? What's your message to the audience is, and why do you want to be a congressman?
Right. I think the two most important things in this district are education and
education's the higher education,
K-12 and higher ed.
Okay.
Right.
And the training.
And the career alternatives,
yeah,
absolutely. And then real opportunity and a positive outlook, 25, 50 years out. What does the economy look like? What's the future of work? What's the state of the environment? And in both those areas, I'm the only educator in the field. I'm the only brick and mortar and new economy job creator in the field. So I bring a lot of experience solving complex problems. And I think what you see in Congress is really a lack of the best ideas, a lack of solutions-based thinking and evidence-based thinking.
So they're not a problem solver.
Exactly. And I think we're all tired of career politicians. We want folks who are going to come in with current ideas who are acting only in the public interest.
Well, the politicians, they're there. They say they will bring bacon to home.
Right. Pork barrel politics. That's right.
Exactly
That's
what
right.
it is. So,
and Congress is the place because the federal government has a huge impact on K-12 education and higher ed affordability, even though it's only a small part of the budget.
So it's just not the education. You're running it because you believe in America that provided the letters of opportunity for your parents to come to our shore, right, and realize the American dream. And you want to make sure those people who are your constituency and that they have the opportunity to realize the American dream as well.
Absolutely. In my parents' experience, my dad came in 1959, my mom in 1963. There was always the sense that this was their America too. There is no us and them, there's only us. And so I want to preserve that because, again, I see this shift in direction.
Why is that?
I have to blame our president. Okay. I have to blame those who somehow
he's
feel...
a divisive and...
Absolutely. His rhetoric is unprecedented in terms of being divisive.
And people still elected him.
I think
and people still follow him?
So I believe that his supporters are primarily driven by, we're tired of politics as usual, we want change. There's a very small part of the Trump base that is, truly divisive, probably racist, definitely ahistorical. But I think the majority of people who voted for the current president felt like we want change and we don't have any other choice. And I feel like even in the 10th district, we've done things the same way for a long time.
So if you're going to, what's your message is that if you're going to elect Barbara Comstock or whoever your opponent is, you're going to get the same thing. You're not going to have any change.
You're going to get the same old. I mean,
it's not going to change anything.
If you look at Barbara Comstock's legislation, I see two things: opioids and MS-13. These are not the most important issues. They're important. But they are not the most important issues about the future of this country. And she also, as I understand,
vote with the repealing the ACA.
Yep. Well, she backed away at the last second, but she votes over 90% of the time with the president.
And with their party.
And with the party. And of the 435 people in Congress, she's number 4 in terms of being the furthest away from her constituents. And when I've worked in the community for a long time. We restored an African-American schoolhouse. We saw how the community came together, interfaith, no racial division, no ethnic divisions. And yet
that represents the value and the character of our country.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this district should be a leader nationally in showing the way forward. And our current leadership is very much backward looking. There's no new ideas. ACA, she would have repealed it. When you look at all the movement.
And what about the immigration?
Absolutely.
What about Muslim banning?
She makes positive statements.
Did she speak out against it?
It's very tentative. It's very infrequent. And I think when you look at this district, everyone in this district wants somebody who is looking for what's best for all of us, not just one party.
Not but just selected few.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So that's the message. What about job and economy? Obviously, the Trump effect has been being a divisive and filled with hatred and bigotry, as the people say.
Yeah.
And that effect is also in Northern Virginia and Virginia as well. What about the job and economy? What do you intend to do to create jobs, build prosperity, that people can realize the American dream, make sure there's 5 million jobs that is vacant. People do not have the skills to get those jobs. So what do you intend to do to make sure we can correct that?
I think there are a number of things that are long-term and short-term. Long-term, certainly, kids have to leave school ready for college and ready to compete in the world. Those who are not going to college should have alternative pathways that provide real economic opportunity, and college just has to be more affordable. So education, certainly. But when you think of the places where jobs...
Rather than being drawn with all kinds of loans they have to take.
Exactly. $250,000 for a degree. But when you think of
But you have to understand that you cannot make it education free because it's going to cost, it's going to increase our...
Of course. And the thing is that the federal government has a role in the way that it makes financial aid available. And there are ways to control costs, as with health care. But ultimately, when you look at the places in the U.S. where job creation is happening, you have to create an ecosystem where new companies want to start, employees want to be, and businesses want to grow. And that's a mix of a very tolerant space where everyone's welcome. You have mass transit, you have affordable housing, you have cultural resources. So interestingly, when you look nationally, almost everywhere companies want to be and people want to work, it's democratic leadership. You think of San Francisco, you think of Seattle,
Silicon Valley,
you think of
Massachusetts,
New York.
right?
Exactly. And it's because Democrats are uniquely well positioned to think not just about the short-term outcomes, but the really long-term opportunities. And that is, I think, what makes the 10th District a place that's not just dependent on the federal government, but is a place where new businesses want to start and stay. And I think that's what I would focus on.
So you do have an opponent. There's a primary.
Yeah, it's an active primary, thankfully. I mean, I'm excited about it. We haven't had an active primary in at least 8 years.
How many people you're in the Democratic Party
I think
you're
there
running
are
against?
8 people in the Democratic
What
side.
sets you apart?
There are a number of things. First of all, I'm the only person who's created jobs in the race, both brick and mortar at a school.
So you're a business person, you understand how to create a
business
job.
person. Number 2, I'm an educator, so I know how you prepare people for what's coming in a world that's quite uncertain. Number 3, I'm the only candidate that is representative of the full range of constituents in the district, in the sense of I'm a child of immigrants, I was born here, but it's a 30% minority district, and it's important for
But that's not going to propel you 30%. Is not going to
Oh,
propel
no,
you. They're not
absolutely.
Gonna, they don't, obviously, they don't vote, all of them.
Absolutely. And I feel like when you think about a district that values education, values economic growth, and values diversity, I'm the candidate that, fills each of those and offers somebody who can represent in each of those areas.
So that propels you to being a tech entrepreneur, being a lawyer, being an educationist, and those are what you bring to the table compared to other candidates.
And I think
you're not a professional politician.
I'm not a politician. So what I'm
But it
only
worked for
doing
Trump.
this.
Do you think it's going to work for somebody
Well,
else?
he had big name recognition. That's the thing that
so
as a new person, but certainly.
But he didn't have any policy.
Right. I mean, he was particularly kind of policy avoidant. I think the real opportunity here is, particularly as somebody who's been in education so long, what I look for is how are we going to succeed over the long term. And it is really about realizing that division doesn't get us anywhere, trying to help the select few at the expense of the many, as you were talking about with healthcare. It makes no sense to strip healthcare from tens of millions of Americans. It's not good economically. It's not just. It is destabilizing for markets. So
why are they doing this? And they still get reelected.
I think there are a couple of things. I think they're beholden to a very small group of powerful industrial players
Well,
and
but if you
individuals.
look at Virginia, sir, I think most of them in the House are Republican.
Yes. So at the state level, absolutely.
No, I'm talking about the House.
Yes.
The U.S. House
even at the US
yeah,
you're right,
they're
right.
not the senators.
Yep.
But Tim Kaine and Warner.
I think when I talk to my neighbors in the district, I think a lot of people vote for the Republican Party because they want to know that their money is being spent well. They don't want to spend too much. But when you look at our district.
But they do, they want money to be spent well?
No, I was going to say that's a misunderstanding of Republicans.
So they're misguided.
Yeah, it's misguided. As I say, every dynamic economic hub in America is led by Democrats. So that's what I mean.
They're
it's a
the ones
misconception.
they have the success story to produce jobs, build prosperity, create.
Exactly. And so I think the Democrats have to really communicate that we understand job creation, we understand economic opportunity, and we understand justice. And the Republicans really, they've kept their message focused on ways to motivate the base. And I think a lot of people vote Republican.
But they don't deliver.
Exactly. I mean, 7 years
isn't it going to bite it back to them eventually?
People are going to
realize
the
that
American people are reasonable, and they're going to say,
and hopefully they're fair.
Exactly, and well, they are, and they're going to say, the Republicans had 7 years to craft a great bill,
but they haven't,
and it's taking people off of health care, and they're not fulfilling their promises. And I think the American people realize that, and they realize that's not consistent with their values.
But the fact of the matter is that despite all these problems and challenges, you still have, there's only 2 Republican senators that stood up, and 3 maybe in this case. Collins was one of them, Senator McCain, who's a great American, and Lisa Murkowski, who's probably in the border. How they go back to their constituency, show their face, they're destroying the whole healthcare system, they're reducing the Medicaid, reducing the pre-existing condition. 23 million people would not have the health insurance. The CBO analysis is not even out. How do they go tell the people?
Well, when they're going back, they're meeting a lot of resistance. A lot of, like
but
Barbara
Comstock,
no town halls.
You know what they say? Well, there are a bunch of liberals and progressive. They are basically an obstacle, all these things.
No, I think certainly there is a misunderstanding of the policies. I think what I've seen, though, whenever I see town halls reported, the American people are actually quite upset with Congress not doing anything, and then when it does attempt to do something, to do things that are just patently unjust. And, Democrats have support on all major issues: common sense gun control, environmental protection, health care, mass incarceration, and yet the Republicans win, and gerrymandering is a big reason. Spending is a big reason, and I think that 2018 will be an opportunity for the American people to say, we need to protect what's most important, and we need to make sure our leaders are representative and are looking ahead to what's best for everyone, not just, again, special interests or select groups.
Which has been the case.
Which has been the case.
So the lobbyists have access to the politicians.
Yes.
People like you, some people who are ordinary Americans who do not have the money to contribute, they don't get access to the politicians.
That's right.
Because the fact that they basically, the people who are lobbyists and people who can spend a lot of money, people who are wealthy, they're the one who have the voice.
And the same people always get hurt as a result. The poor, vulnerable
the middle class.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think, one of the things I try to express is that good government costs less than less government. That is a critical understanding. As a lawyer, this is what you study. When you look at George Washington and Alexander Hamilton, they were asking for more government because they saw what happens when the government's not effective. And what we need to focus on is making sure the government is representative and it is effective. Criticisms about inefficiency and a lack of action are all fair. But I know that when the right people are in leadership positions and they actually represent their constituents, you will have the positive change we want, and people won't be so cynical and pessimistic. I mean, I work with young people all the time. They are waiting for our leaders to show them what's possible.
But they don't vote.
Well, they can't yet. So I work with 15 to 18-year-olds.
Okay,
but you're right. You're right.
But the millennium do not have that active political engagement they need to have.
You know, a number of millennials work for me, and they say what we're waiting on is real leaders that we can commit
well,
to.
it doesn't really matter whether real leaders or not. The fact of the matter is you have
to participate.
You have
I totally
to participate
agree with you. Yep.
to make sure you
Your
can
voice,
vote.
Yep.
Yeah, make sure you can,
Yep.
make sure your voice is heard. You're not going to make any changes if you're waiting for Angel to come in.
Yeah,
right?
And I think this is part of what's important to me is to run a race and a campaign where you look at it and you want to be part of it. You feel it's yours. And I think that's one of the key components to getting young people engaged, as people like Bernie Sanders or Jeremy Corbyn and others have done.
Well, I'm not going to go to England for Jeremy Corbyn, but the Bernie Sanders philosophy in the last election was get rid of the Wall Street,
Yep.
get rid of the bank,
Yep.
also make the tuition free, which has cost billions and billions of dollars,
Yep.
and which will also increase our deficit.
Yep.
We cannot afford it. And obviously, but there's no such thing called free things.
Right.
It's an entitlement program. And that resonates very well with the young people, as I understand.
Yes.
So how can you change that conversation?
So I think
that we have to make sure we can afford it.
Yes, and I think that's my question on all things.
Okay.
Whether it's a Republican plan or Medicare for all is, can we afford it? And I think that's the first question to ask. But I think I go back to this good government costing less than less government. There's an example from New York where New York is going to provide a lawyer to people who are going to be evicted. $200 million it's going to cost. But you save $300 million in services for people who are going to be homeless because they were unjustly evicted. That to me is good government, and it's just. And I think whoever is offering a program, whether it's a defense increase or a healthcare increase, we need to look at it and say, can we afford it with $20+ trillion of debt? And I think that too is, why a lot of people vote one way or the other is they don't feel the current path is sustainable. They look for change. And oftentimes the people they pick are not able to deliver it because they're not really interested in real change and positive outcomes.
So let's suppose you get elected and you are sworn in January.
Yep.
What would be the first thing you would do?
The first thing I would do,
obviously, thank your family, thank your
yes,
constituency,
of course,
and to make sure that you present them,
and all of the constituents and supporters. I mean, the first thing I would do is I would make a commitment to work with anyone.
So
in
you
Congress,
will go to bipartisan.
Right. Anyone who has a better solution, I'm open to that conversation. Number two, I would bring a real focus on public education in schools. And number three, I would make sure that Congress is a place that when you look at your leaders, you're proud of them. You feel like that is somebody I want in that position, and that is somebody who is listening to me. So that's the third thing. And I think if there are enough of us in Congress doing those things, we will have the change we want to see in the world.
So you want to be a change maker?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Change that you believe in, as President Obama's slogan was?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But again, the one thing certainly at the House level is you have to be pragmatic. You have to be able to afford it. It has to reflect the values of your district. So one of the beauties of a House campaign is you're very much of this place. I've been in the district almost 15 years. I've built things in this district, raised my kids. They want to know that you're from here and that you're going to carry these values to Washington, D.C.
So let's talk about immigration.
Sure.
You are a byproduct of, obviously, your parents came as immigrants from India. I am a first-generation immigrant.
Yes.
Why there was the comprehensive immigration plan was passed by the U.S. Senate, but it didn't get passed in the House. Why? And they're doing Republican Party, as you know. There was a Senator Cotton who proposed something that reduced the H-1 visa.
Yep.
Okay. Why they're doing what they're doing? And you do know that if 1.2 million jobs would not be filled.
Yeah.
It will reduce if you reduce the H-1 visa by half. There's not that many people who have the skills to have the job. It will reduce the GDP growth by 0.7%, and they still go vote.
So I think there are a number of things. A lot of what we see is ahistorical. It reflects a lack of understanding. We are
So
all
lack of
immigrants.
understanding. So we're not doing a good selling job.
Yeah, we're all immigrants. Number two, if you look at economic growth, it requires immigration. Growth requires immigration, and particularly
especially the people who have the talent,
skill set
the
that,
skill
that
set,
contribute.
Right.
And number three, we are a country that has been historically quite welcoming. I think the only reason you've seen a shift of late is there is an unfair concern about terror from certain groups that the evidence doesn't support.
And we need to protect our homeland.
Right, and we absolutely have to.
And need to protect our borders.
And number two, I think the current administration, current Congress is doing things that certain parts of their base reward. So I think some of the policies that you see, while not in the best interests of the country, they get a lot of airtime and make progress because there are certain elements of the base that are pushing certain outcomes that maybe are not in the best interest of all of us.
But why not the people who are opposing them stand up and say, okay, you're talking about a reduction in GDP. You're talking about the people, you're talking about, and if you do that, it's going to hurt our economy, and so on and so forth. How come they don't talk about that?
So you've identified the most important issue in democracy, and that is civic engagement.
Yeah.
If you want to take money out of politics, all you have to do is have people show up to vote. Do the research, show up to vote. We wouldn't have to spend any money to reach you. So you've identified the critical question. If people were informed and active, they would have the democracy
they have to be informed and engaged.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you so
and
much,
good luck
Frank.
to you.
Thank you so much.
This is Frank Islam wishing you a great week, and thank you for watching.